I'm gonna watch the video. I'll pause it to give my first impressions on the characters themselves. Let's look at the new video. So even though Chrom is one of my favorites, again, I take the same approach I always take with all of these permanent banners, and I just don't pull right now because he might end up pity breaking me in the future, because I like to pull on seasonal banners. I like to pull on legendary banners. He may show up on a legendary banner in the future where I want to target a certain, a certain amount of colors. So we'll see. Typical intro, Fire Emblem heroes, yep. New heroes join the battle, so they are permanent. This isn't a seasonal, which is great. We have female Morgan. This was, I like the art a lot. It looks really cute, fits her definitely really well. She is a blue tome flyer. I feel like this is maybe a little bit of a bait to those that were pushing for Summer Corrin, because then all of a sudden we ended up with Morgan here. However, I have looked a little bit at the stats, and don't feel too bad if you got Summer Corrin and Morgan has just released, because there is a difference between them, and I'll touch on that later. But otherwise, blue tome flyer. Interesting voice as well. So what do we see right away, right? Blar's Serpent Plus, and the plus on the weapon indicates that it is an inheritable weapon that can be used by others, not just herself. So if you want to inherit her to other units, that is possible. We have Iceberg, probably going to be really strong on her. We also have Mirror Stance. That's new. This is definitely not currently in the game. It's definitely interesting. It's going to be like a sturdy stance, but more aggressive. And of course, because it gives res, it actually gives you some damage on Iceberg as well, if you do end up getting that. The weapon itself grants defense resistance 6 during combat if foe initiates. So you're going to want to use her as an enemy phase unit. You want her to bait people. And for a flyer, this is actually kind of unique, because most flyers play aggressively, and there is a lack of enemy phase flyer units, specifically the type that want to enemy phase. So for instance, Summer Corrin is better on player phase, Noe is better on player phase. You can build them as enemy phase units, don't get me wrong, but their stats are oriented towards that playstyle. And Blar's Serpent definitely encourages the enemy phase playstyle, have people attack into you. Mirror Stance encourages that as well. And then you have Guard as well. So if you're going to want to attack into a Zelgius, if you want to attack into a Ira, you're not going to feel bad that you're charging their really, really strong special and go. And yeah, I am considering Baruka. I'm still considering, like, the melee enemy phase flyers do exist, but when we're talking about ranged, there is a lack of them. And Spring Camilla is probably the best when it comes to this, maybe with close counter and something like that, but it would be expensive. Attack play, again, all her kit is very synergistic and may not require any sort of changes for people that may pull for her. So in first impression, this will be really good for people that don't have a lot of skill fodder, and not much changes will be required. My guess is because this is a Blar Serpent Plus tome, it should also be refinable. And you can probably add more speed to it, more res, probably those will be the two best. So continuing on. He looks really chubby. What happened, Morgan? Anyways, surprisingly not a armor unit, right? Because we've had so many armor units released lately with this power creep with armors and such, and for some reason he's not an armor. So he's being put into a pool that's not, it's not saturated. We don't have a lot of red mages. We only have Tharja, Katarina, Leon. Again, you can't really count Leon or Arvis for long-term playability because they're limited. Then you have Sophia, Henry. So there's a limited kind of pool here for the reds, and I'm talking strictly infantry red mages. So you really are limited to like Tharja and Sophia for most red mages, and you may not even end up with a lot of Tharjas. So the fact that he's kind of in a pool that needed a bit of help is, on first impression, pretty cool. He's a cute boy, I guess. One thing I wanted to point out, guys, is that we had the first Morgan, the female flyer Morgan, have 5 skills, and that the male Morgan has 4 skills. And this is interesting to me because some people have already said that female Morgan may get demoted, but I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't know the history totally behind it, but from what I can remember, like Soth, for instance, had 4 skills and then he got demoted. And then, was it La Rochelle also had 4 skills and got demoted? I don't remember La Rochelle having an A skill. I could be totally wrong on this, but I think she actually had 4 skills. And don't forget, guys, Soth had a legendary weapon, and La Rochelle had a legendary weapon. So just because male Morgan here has a legendary weapon does not mean that he could get demoted. So I think, in my opinion, I really think male Morgan may get demoted, and that's jumping, you know, that's jumping leaps and bounds. But so far I haven't seen 5 units with 5 skills get demoted, so that is my impression here. The reason people may say that female Morgan's getting demoted is because she doesn't have a legendary weapon, but yeah, it just seems like the legendary weapon precedent doesn't really exist anymore. So in terms of my probability for units may getting demoted, I think the least special here is male Morgan, even though his tome is amazing and even though he has a new skill. But just to kind of talk about it, you know, dull ranged, I mean, this speaks for itself. It's basically like Mulligear on a B skill. That's pretty good actually, because the B skill is not really used for stats. It's mostly used for combat oriented skills. So sometimes you have quick riposte, sometimes you have desperation, sometimes you have like, I don't know, renewals and breakers and such. So if you wanted to give him a niche to counter units like end up really strong, like full of buffs, then you know this skill is decent, but it's not great either. It's just decent. So that's why I don't think it's necessarily needed to be locked at 5-star. Nobody's gonna be pulling for dull ranged, whereas people pull for like distant counter, or they pull for Swift Sparrow or something, you know? Anyways, looking at his actual legendary weapon, grants defense 3, cool. I mean, that's another weapon with defense 3, and it kind of implies that he may be a good user of close counter. After combat, if unit attacked, so he has to player phase, inflicts attack speed on 5 on the target and foes within 2 spaces target through the next action, and grants a bunch of attack and speed to unit and allies within 2 spaces. So this is really interesting because it feels like a dagger user on a tome, which doesn't exist right now. So if you think about like Clariss's bow without buffing your allies, if you think about Peshkats without the defensive debuffs and the defensive buffs, this is kind of interesting because a tome has not had this sort of supportive effect on it. I consider this effect supportive, not aggressive. And again, this tome isn't necessarily game breaking. So again, if I'm gonna take a hypothetical educational guess, I'm gonna tell you guys that male Morgan might be the biggest candidate for demotion here, and the red pool of mages definitely needs it. So maybe they're thinking ahead here. So yeah, my personal favorite of the banner, Crom himself. Red Cavalry sword unit. It seems odd because it's not necessarily his Great Lord status. Obviously his normal skin is like his regular Lord status, but his Great Lord actually was still infantry. So even though this would consider alternate, don't forget that some of you may not know, but in Awakening, he was able to switch skills. He was able to, sorry, it's not swap skills, but swap classes into a horse unit. And this is kind of even implied because Frederick had the, you know, the armored horse, and Crom could have like also did that. So Frederick could have trained him. So it's not necessarily non-canon. It can fit here. So it makes it makes sense. As for the art, it's awesome. They did change the artist, by the way. For those of you that didn't notice, I remember this, but the other 2 Croms for Winter Crom and regular Crom were different. Anyways, Matt Mercer, I love it. On first impression, again, 5 skills, not likely to be demoted. I don't think so. What's interesting here is we'd have another Sword Valor unit. Great, because the more units that can have Sword Valor, the better. Just because people really could use this sort of skills to, you know, level up other characters in them, and it makes me cringe whenever I see people not leveling up their units. They pull for these units and not use them. So, you know, if you give the people some sort of encouragement to get some SP, great, go ahead. His base kit is pretty good by itself. You don't necessarily have to change anything here other than maybe Sword Valor. Actually, in the A slot, Fury's going to work really well, but I'll get to that. It's related to his weapon. You probably want to run like Heavy Blade in his seal slot, just because he wants to proc off Aethers. You know, if you're going to use a high skill cost and you don't want to change much in his kit, then doing that's really good. Chill skills are really, really, really strong, and they probably will become meta as soon as they become more available. And honestly speaking, Soren is already the first example of a chill skill being really available. Now tomorrow we'll also find out if Fallen Celica did indeed get demoted, based on what most people have hypothesized, and that's really gonna break into like a chill kind of, we're gonna chill out in the next meta, you know, just chill. So Harsh Command, guys, get on it. Or Micaiah's gonna get stronger with Sacrifice. Anyways, his weapon himself, and I was talking about why Fury is really good here. Effective against dragon foes, cool. As you guys have probably noticed, we have this colorless icon with a dragon here. Yes, that may be a thing. What's interesting here is if unit's HP is less than 100%, not 100%. So unlike Fallen Celica where you want it to be at full health, or the summer weapons, Elysian Summer where they want it to be at full health, if he's actually not full health, he gains 5 to all stats. It's easier to not be full health than it is to be full health, by the way. I mean, he's basically going to have a pretty weak start to his combat, but then once he has his first combat, and because he has Fury, so what you want to do is, like, best case scenario for Chrom, you make him fight a green unit, have an easy win, and then boom, he's buffed like crazy. He's Fury, like +8 to all stats, and he's under 100%. It's insanely strong, like insanely strong. He's gonna definitely, this is crazy. He's gonna be like my Chrom on a horse. It's unfortunate that he can't run Steady Breath, but he's still gonna be amazing. We'll talk about summoning in a bit, but I don't think that you guys should sleep on this. He's gonna be pretty strong, at least as like a dual phase unit. We haven't really had many great dual phase sword cavalries. It seems like a lot of them have fit into a particular niche. I think the only one that comes close enough to a dual phase is probably Eldigan, if you give him like a plus speed IV and go from there. All the other ones, you know, like Sigbert and Roy, player phase. Elwood, and I mean Elwood could be player phase, but unfortunately for his enemy phase, he's pretty, the only real enemy phase you use with Elwood is like his res and distant counter, right? He's not that bulky on the defense side. So a lot of the Red Cat and Xander as well, enemy phase, like they're kind of like split like this, and the only one that I feel can dual phase well is Eldigan. So yeah, like Chrom here may be able to kind of do that as well. He's gonna fit on both phases. Yeah, I want this, but like I said, I don't pull on. So yeah, that's my first impressions. I like them. I liked Awakening a lot. I'm not like an anti-Awakening person, so I like them a lot. I'll probably end up getting them though on legendary banners, or they'll end up being a pity break for me because I don't pull on these banners.